Okay, we'll just get started in a second. So, thank you very much for attending this webinar. If you're on the app or the Zoom software, or you can ask questions on the right-hand side or left-hand side of your screen, by all means get involved. If you're watching this on YouTube, then by all means get in touch with us with the details at the end of this presentation, and we're always available if you've got any questions. As well as if you wanted to have a conversation personally about your own finances. And if you go on to Expat Financial Planning, you can see that there's a calendar function in there, at which point you can book yourself in for a telephone call, video call, or even a meeting if you really want to. So I thought I'd just do a little bit about myself. So my name's Andrew Talbot, and I'm CFP here in Singapore, which is Certified Financial Planner. I'm a big believer in qualifications because it helps with doing the actual the job or providing a good service. So I got a diploma in financial planning in the UK, Australia. I did a degree in financial services. I'm licensed in Singapore under the Monetary Authority of Singapore, so that's what MAS stands for. I think I've been doing this for about 16 years, probably a little bit longer if I really wanted to add in some internships before university. Fee-based financial planning. So if you go onto the website, you can see our fees. So they are displayed there. So it's not necessarily about when you come into a meeting, you should know how much your financial planning is going to cost you, rather than someone just making it up as they go along. So I'm a big believer in transparency. And this is why we started the expatfinancialplanning.com website, to provide that transparency in the expat world. So if you've got a policy or a portfolio that you're just unsure about, maybe it's a little bit opaque and you want a second opinion, then by all means get in contact with us and we'll quite happily go through this over a video call or a telephone call, just give you some ideas of how much that's costing you, or whether it's going to help you with your future financial planning. Okay, enough about me. Today we're going to talk about FIRE, which is effectively a movement that's been going on around the world to live frugally and retire decades earlier. And this is a BBC website story, so bbc.com capital. And there is some real life examples of what someone has been trying to do with their finances. So we'll go through some of the issues that or considerations to think about with this, and then actually how do you structure this? What do you need to do in order to participate in this? So what is FIRE? Right, it is a movement that's, as I said, been going around the world recently, but I think it's just the term FIRE has been going around the world. You could probably go back to Scrooge and Charles Dickens, who did a similar type of scenario where you're trying to save as much as you can and spend as little as possible. Hence the Scrooge term. The idea is really to save enough to retire in your 30s and 40s at the latest. So if you're in your 20s, then that's really what you're trying to do. So those stories about having smashed avocado on toast and spending money on that and flat whites rather than actually saving for a deposit on a house really comes from some of these movements about FIRE, financial independence, retire early. And again, it's just to save as much as you can by changing your lifestyle. So it's a real lifestyle change about not spending money every month, but actually saving it or investing it. We'll come on to some of those issues later on. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to quit your job. It just means that you're not going to be necessarily dependent on that job. So not having to wait for the salary or the paycheck every month, not necessarily have to make sure that you're working in order to pay your mortgage, but really to have a lifestyle choice. So you've got a number of years where you're really sort of extreme saving in order to get to that point where you can actually start enjoying maybe your lifestyle. So steps to these extreme frugality is really just saving 70% of your yearly income, comparing every item to the work spent, the amount you need to work in order to pay for that. So one of those examples is that if you bought smashed avocado on toast or a flat white, how many hours would you need to work, or how many minutes, days, etc. would you need to work in order to pay for that? And then really see if that's an opportunity cost that you could use to put that into an investment account, and how much that would save you in the short term, and then how much you could grow it in the long term. Again, lowering your cost of your lifestyle, so not having fancy cars, not going out, generally living as a hermit, trying to create these multiple streams of income, and I'll come on to an example of that later on, and obviously lowering your food bill. But it is really about the lifestyle that you want to live. So we've talked to this before about having a bucket list, and having these goals, events and moments that you want to achieve in your life. You may want to achieve this later on. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to do it in the first couple of years if you really want to save your salary. But it still comes down to, what do you want to do? Do you want to plan your life around your finances? So life over money is we talked about this before in a previous webinar. But it does resonate with this FIRE movement about the financial independence. The theory within that BBC story and in other stories is to save 70% of your income. There's a couple of other examples here to maybe just get started with it. So half your age is a wage. So saying that, so if you're 40, save 20% of your income. The other option is, okay, you're 5 to 10 years away from this retirement, which is really where you are with FIRE, is you're saving 80% of your disposable income. So if you reduce your costs as much as you can, then you're going to be saving more and more of that disposable income. In reality, with FIRE, you're probably saving 100% of your disposable income because your costs have come down substantially. And then the option 3, which is what we always do when we're doing financial planning, it's the core of our service. It's the core of the financial planning, is to forecast these cash flows. How much do you need to retire on? How much do you need as that financial independence to retire early? And that's what we do as a service, is to provide that information. So when you look at lifetime cash flow forecasting or planning, you're assessing assets and liabilities, income and expenditure, those goals and aspirations, the changes in the future, any economic conditions, identifying those surpluses and shortfalls throughout the life. So if we took the FIRE movement, you'd say, okay, what are my current assets? What are my liabilities? I need to pay down those liabilities quickly. Expenditure and income, I need to cut my expenditure as much as I can. And my goals and aspirations are, I want to retire earlier. So how do I do that? Is there any economic conditions that are going to make that difficult? And then how much, not necessarily shortfalls do you have, but surpluses can I have in order to make sure that I'm not going to have a shortfall later on when you've come to retire? Explore those what-if strategies. So a bit more detail about what this is. It's really assessing everything that you've got. All of that income, all of those expenses, all of those liabilities, the debts, all of your current, your expenditure. And with the FIRE, you're probably concentrating on number 2 there, which is the discretionary expenditure, or the current expenditure. How can you really get that down? So we've got the sort of the personal, holidays, luxury and leisure spending. The FIRE movement is cutting that down as much as you can. And then with assets, and to a certain extent liabilities, but with assets, you're saying, okay, they need to be in a certain allocated portfolio in order to provide that income in the future. And we'll come on to that shortly. Let's go on to So if we look at this as a timeline, we've got a couple of examples where someone has got pre-retirement and retirement. So understand the two differences between them on this timeline. So they're 40 and they want to retire at 68. In FIRE, they're probably retiring 5 or 6 years after that. So they probably want to retire at 45. So you've still got all of these goals in place. They might have some of the daughters going to university, etc. So it's just shifting this pre-retirement category or point where you want to do it. And then you can see where there's a shortfall in retirement, which is the red on that graph. So you're just making sure that these categories are shifted a little bit earlier. So what is that number? What is that financial independence number? Enough that you can retire early. How much money do you need to spend? As mentioned before, it is a good point to look at that expenditure, draw out that budget, which is normally a word that people don't like using, or work out that spending plan, which is another better phrase to do it. So what's your spending plan this month? What are you going to spend your salary on, and where can you cut money off that, or cut off that expenditure in order to save that cash? Quick pre-retirement summary. So we mentioned those two areas. Save as much as you can. Use techniques to save money, expense apps, for instance. Change your lifestyle to fit those goals. Really make sure that you're saving enough cash into something that can provide that income. And then we're into after retirement. So we'll talk about the 4% withdrawal rule shortly, but it's really about sustainable withdrawals. How much do you need, planning this, and then the asset allocation. So a lot of all of this FIRE theory is where have you put your money? And in order to make sure that you've got an income level, you need to have effectively an equity portfolio. You need to be 100% equity portfolio because you need that growth in order to withdraw it. So what is a safe withdrawal rate? Now, this theory has been around since 98 when there was a Trinity study on it. And it's about using the number 4%. So if the study looked back to the periods of 1925 to 1995, so during that period, so you've got lots of ups and downs, you've got lots of different crises going on. Equity markets probably crashed, they had bull markets. But if you look back through the data and you try to apply a rule to it, how much could you withdraw every year without effectively reducing the capital amount in that portfolio? And the number was 4%. So this was the number that you could withdraw every year and still keep the capital in your portfolio. So that's where the FIRE movement came from. If I've got 1.25 million and I want $50,000 per year, then I need 4% growth on that without depleting it. There are lots of issues with this. And there's a great book called Beyond the 4% by a guy called Adrian Akasanya. Really read that book. That's a great book to show some of the issues about sustainable withdrawal and why not necessarily this 4% works. If you want to go into detail about your own finances, then we're quite happy to run through this, to really go through this. There's a couple of podcasts about this as well. Andy Hart, Maven Money Advisor, I really suggest you get him, start looking at that podcast. He talks through this FIRE movement as well, and also the sustainable withdrawal amount. So it's a great resource if you're looking to expand your knowledge in this area. So we can go on to that at a further date. Now, I talked about multiple streams of income before, and we have talked about this in a previous webinar about how to generate, in this case, 100,000 per annum, and where does it come from? So when we talked about the investment portfolio, we had 50,000 per year because it was 1.25 million and it was 4%. This is where we've got that investment income. But you could have it from other sources of other sources as well. So you can have a property portfolio that provides the rental income. So if you're trying to get to your FIRE position, then you pay off your mortgage so that provides a rental income, or you buy another property so that provides a rental income. So it's understanding, okay, where's your income going to come from? And then you're reducing your risk. So the 4% withdrawal rate or living off your assets really becomes a lot more sustainable if you've got multiple sources of income. So, I mean, conventional pensions are really restricted and they're likely to kick in when you're in your 60s. And the same with sort of state security or state pension, normally kick in your 60s. But you can still take an income from investments and rental income. And also part-time work. So the FIRE movement isn't, as mentioned, necessarily about retiring early completely. It's about maybe changing your working life so that you enjoy work, or you do part-time consultancy. You're just not worried about having to pay off a mortgage or worry about that paycheck every month. This is components of the financial planning, and step one is always why. I always like coming back to this picture because I think sometimes we get confused about where we are in the cycle. The why bit is, why are you doing this? So in the FIRE movement, you want to retire early. That is the why. That is your financial plan. You need to build that nest egg. You need to buy another house. You need to provide that multiple sources of income. Step two is, well, how do you do that? And that could be another property. It could be a bank account, which I wouldn't suggest, but it could be an investment platform that is invested in low-cost global diversified equities to provide that 4% per year or a sustainable withdrawal rate. The where would be, I'm invested in equities, I'm invested in cash, the house down the road that you actually bought in order to do it. It's the detail that needs to make the vehicle work, and the vehicle needs to make the financial planning work. So if you're looking at your finances, look at these three structures first. Always start with step one. What are you trying to achieve? Does the vehicle that you currently use to achieve that, is it cost efficient? Is it doing what it should do? And is it doing that because you're invested in the wrong areas? You've got expensive investments, the property's not performing, it's costing you money every month. So it's understanding, okay, what's the detail? Devil's in the detail, as they say. So come back to the goals. Your objective in this instance is to retire earlier. How long are you going to do that? 5 years, 10 years, shorter period. How much risk are you willing to take? So you've got to understand what that movement is in terms of FIRE. You are going to be 100% equity in order to achieve that. And then the savings rates. If you're going to save 70% of your income or 80% of that disposable income, then it's a massive lifestyle choice. And then the investment risk is, well, you're going to be 100% equity, and you need to understand what that means to your portfolio and how investor behavior will change when you've got ups and downs in the market. But the theory behind that withdrawal rate or the FIRE movement comes from being in equity positions. You could also be in property. There's the other sources of income. So there is a case of, okay, what's that allocation mix? And then you've got to monitor it with every financial plan. So some points to think about, and I think it's important to go through this. Extreme frugality might not be for everyone because you are changing your lifestyle in order to achieve it. You could become the Scrooge, i.e. you're not spending any money whatsoever, but you're doing it because you've got a future goal that you want to become financial independence. It doesn't mean that you're going to stop working. It just means that you're not necessarily a slave to that salary every month. And you've got to understand what the cost of living is during that retirement period. If you're only going to be working for 20 years and you've got to fund your retirement of 60 years or even longer, then you've got to understand, well, what's the cost of living going to look like? But again, it's not necessarily about stop working completely. It's just maybe stopping the job that you're in at the moment. there are different advantages that make it easier to achieve the FIRE movement in your 30s and 40s. If you have a family, then it makes it a lot harder, and they're really going to buy into this movement as well. Otherwise, you end up with problems within relationship over money, and it's a big source of frustration. If you look at a lot of why people break up, money does come out into it. So you've got to make sure that everyone is bought into this this goal. If you're if you've got sort of a partner or a family, to understand that, okay, there is an end point for this. So to do, make sure you got all those goals, have that specific purpose, consider the timescale, think of the currency and tax, because we're in the expat world, so we've always got a currency issue, we've always got potential taxes in different countries. Select the vehicle that you're going to do to achieve this. Is it going to be property? Is it going to be investment platform? 100% equity? Construct that portfolio and then monitor it. Get in touch through these communication areas or channels, and I'm quite happy to talk about it over a Zoom call, especially the sort of the 4% withdrawal rate and everything else that goes along with that. Okay, so thanks very much, and I hope to speak to you soon.